Single-grain experiment. The single-grain experiment was an experiment carried out at the University of Wisconsin-Madison from May 1907 to 1911. The experiment tested if cows could survive on a single type of grain. The experiment would lead to the development of modern nutritional science. History. Foundations. In 1881, agricultural chemist Stephen M. Babcock returned to the United States after earning his doctorate in organic chemistry at the University of Göttingen, Germany, to accept a position at the New York State Agricultural Experiment Station in Geneva, New York, where his first assignment. His findings determined that the feces chemical composition was similar to that of the feed, with the only major exception being the ash. These results were tested and retested, and his results were found to be similar to German studies done earlier. This led Babcock to think about what would happen if the cows were fed a single grain barley, corn, wheat, though that test would not occur for nearly 25 years. 7 years later, Babcock accepted a position at the University of Wisconsin-Madison Agricultural Experiment Station UES as chair of the Agricultural Chemistry Department, and immediately began petitioning Dean of Agriculture William Arnon Henry, then station director, to perform the single-grain experiment. Henry refused. Babcock continued pressing Henry to perform the single-grain experiment, even approaching the UE's animal husbandry chair J.A. Craig. He refused. When W.L. Carlisle replaced Craig in 1897, Carlisle was more receptive to Babcock's idea, initially trying a salt experiment with 8 dairy cows as a matter of taste preference, while 8 other cows received no salt. After one of the 8 cows that did not receive salt died, Carlisle discontinued the experiment, and all the remaining cows were given salt in order to restore their health. Henry, now Dean of Agriculture in 1901, finally relented and gave Babcock permission to perform the experiment. Carlisle approved the experiment with only 2 cows. One cow was fed corn while the other was fed rolled oats and straw, with hopes the experiment would last 1 year. 3 months into the experiment, the oat-fed cow died, and Carlisle halted the event to save the other cow's life. The results were not published, mainly because Babcock did not list how much of each grain the respective cows had consumed. In 1906, a chemist from the University of Michigan, Edwin B. Hart (1874–1953), was hired by Babcock. Hart previously had worked at the New York State Agricultural Experiment Station and had studied physiological chemistry under Albrecht Kossel in Germany. Both worked with George C. Humphrey, who replaced Carlisle as animal husbandry professor, to plan a long-term feeding plan using a chemically balanced diet of carbohydrates, fat, and protein instead of single plant rations as done in Babcock's earlier experiments. The single-grain experiment was thus born in 1907. The experiment. From May 1907 to 1911, the experiment was carried out with Hart as director, Babcock providing the ideas, and Humphrey overseeing the welfare of the cows during the experiment. Elmer McCullum, an organic chemist from Connecticut, was hired by Hart to analyze the grain rations and the cow feces. The experiment called for 4 groups of 4 heifers each, during which 3 groups were raised and 2 pregnancies were carried through during the experiment. The first group ate only corn stover, cornmeal, and gluten feed. The second group ate only nutrients from the wheat plant, wheat straw, wheat meal, and wheat gluten. The third group ate only nutrients from the oat plant, oat straw, and rolled oats, and the last group ate a mixture of the other 3. In 1908, it was shown that the corn-fed animals were the most healthy of the group, while the wheat-fed groups were the least healthy. All 4 groups bred during that year, with the corn-fed calves being the healthiest, while the wheat and mixed-fed calves were stillborn or later died. Similar results were found in 1909. In 1910, the corn-fed cows had their diets switched to wheat, and the non-corn-fed cows were fed corn. This produced unhealthy calves for the formerly corn-fed cows, while the remaining cows produced healthy calves. When the 1909 formulas were reintroduced to the respective cows in 1911, the gestation results of 1909 recurred in 1911. These results were published in 1911. Similar results had been done in the Dutch East Indies, now Indonesia, in 1901, in Poland 1910, and in England in 1906, though the English results were not published until 1912. Legacy. This experiment made it clear that there were marked differences in nutritive values, which could not be detected by any chemical means available at the time, and that the current scientific basis for formulating rations were serious. More important, the experiment led to the conviction that simplified diets must be used for the solution of nutrition problems. It would also lead to a determination that there were minerals and vitamins in food. That research would continue into the 1930s and 1940s, ending in 1948 with the discovery of vitamin B12.